the Admiral Tarleton, decided that a visit to Queenstown was required. They had missed Queenstown on their way around Ireland, and through various petitions they were asked to visit Queenstown. So he then decided that 4 ships of the line would set out on September 1st to visit Queenstown.
The entry in the log of the HMS Vanguard, one of the 4 battleships to sail for Queenstown for the period September 1st, 1875, begins with Dublin Bay. It was to be the final entry in the log of the great battleship, as she never returned to port.
Now, at 10 o'clock on September 1st, they set off from Kingstown in a line. At about midday, they rounded the Kish Bank and headed south.
At this point, hazy conditions were giving way to fog. The captain of the Vanguard, Richard Dawkins, had already handed over the bridge to his officers and gone below. It was midday, and time to relieve the ship from some of the burden of carrying so much fine wine and food. Unbeknownst to Dawkins, Captain Hinckley in the Iron Duke had been overcome with a similar desire. The 4 ships were making good progress, steaming at over 8 knots. They would soon begin a manoeuvre, bringing the Vanguard and Duke abreast of the Hector and HMS Warrior, but the fog was to get worse.
The Admiral then gave the order for the Iron Duke and Vanguard to come up abreast, himself and the Hector. HMS Warrior and Hector went out of view of the Vanguard, which was then completing the manoeuvre with Iron Duke.
Suddenly, out of the fog, a sailing ship emerged and crossed the path of the Vanguard. She veered sharply to port in order to avoid collision. Her port beam was now exposed to the oncoming Iron Duke. Despite frantic efforts by both vessels, alas, they were all too late. The Iron Duke ploughed into the Vanguard about midships on her port side. For an hour and 10 minutes the crew struggled with the pumps against the massive rent in the side of the ship. The great engines came to a halt, and the steaming boilers were vented off. Those aboard the Duke could only assist the doomed vessel by helping to rescue her crew before she gave a final lurch and plunged 20 fathoms to the seabed. The papers of the day were to report that the first reserve guard ship of the Eastern Irish District, HMS Vanguard, based at Kingstown, was lost at sea. All hands were saved. But questions were to remain. How could such a fine modern battleship be lost so easily? The most immediate question, however, was, could the Vanguard be saved?
A team of salvors were sent from Devonport under Commander Batt. Now, they had very little success in salving any of the heavy guns from the ship. They cleared it, made it safe for shipping, and despite attempts to raise it, these all failed. And nothing more was done, but there is some evidence that they returned the following year to clear even more fittings and debris from the deck of the wreck.
Once more, Marlin sets out from Dunleary. Their training would stand to them as the survey progressed.
Well, there is a fair bit of training involved. Because of the depth and the decompression required, we insisted that the whole team, and we had a team of 20, be trained up to extended range diver certification.
What's your run time? 48 minutes. Okay, ready to dive? Ready to dive? Okay, clear.
Going to a depth of 50 metres, the divers first take a brief look at the ship's main capstan. Later, they enter the wreck and penetrate to the ship's gunroom on the main deck. This is where they hope to glimpse a first sight of the ship's great wheel. It's in a remarkable and surprising state of preservation. Having separated into two groups, one of these moves to measure the less well-preserved main wheel assembly situated on the upper deck. The divers measuring the inside wheel now move outside to see the remains of the foremast, which is 28 metres below surface water. They conclude their dive by moving along the port side of the battleship, where the stills photographer hoped to get some shots. But before the divers return to the surface, they must remain some time longer in order to decompress.
Decompression stops are mandatory stops to allow outgassing of nitrogen, and this reduces the risk of decompression sickness, commonly known as a bend or the bends.
Arriving back on the surface, the divers are picked up by the boat. With their final survey dive for the season completed, they return once more successfully to their base in Dunleary. Success, however, was not to follow Captain Dawkins. At a court case of his peers, he was to receive what was described at the time as rough justice.
A court-martial was convened in Devonport aboard HMS Adelaide, and the affair was a very embarrassing one. The loss of HMS Vanguard, a relatively new ship, built in 1870, was an embarrassing one. The loss, half million pounds at the time, and several people had to be blamed. Several officers lost their commissions. Captain Dawkins was severely reprimanded and lost his command. The court case and the sentences that were handed down to the officers, the Carpenter Tidy and Captain Dawkins, were very unpopular, and they seemed to be so unpopular that a ditty and a song was got out about the occasion, and there is much criticism about the Admiralty, and the last verse probably sums up the opinion. And this song is apparently supposed to have been sung in music halls at the time.
We ought to have men up there at Whitehall who know about life on the sea, and clear out those frauds who call themselves lords and out of the